Hello, welcome back. In the previous lecture, we learned how to effectively log a request to the terminal by using a library called Morgan. In this lecture, we are going to code our first database design and use another library called Mongoose. So, what is Mongoose? Mongoose is just an object relational mapper. But the question is, what is an object relational mapper? You can think of it as a virtual object database that can be used from within the programming language itself, which is Node.js. It does all the dirty little work behind the scene where it kind of connects Node.js and MongoDB database without requiring us to write the code to connect them. Mongoose does all the work. So without further ado, let's get started. So first, create a new folder and you click here and right click on e-commerce and you click new folder and you type in models. This folder will store all the database schemas. And what is schema? Schemas is just a blueprint of your database. For example, like user schema or like cart or product and so on and so forth. And second, we are going to create a new file and we're going to name it user.js. Alright. In the user schema file, you need to require a couple of libraries. First is Mongoose, and second is Bicrypt Node.js. So let's kind of like require those two libraries first. var.mongoose equals to require Mongoose, and after that Bicrypt equals to require Bicrypt Node.js. Alright, so once done, what we need to do is we're gonna need to create three sections that we have. Three sections to write the code. Three sections. Like first, we wanna like create the user schema field, and second, we wanna declare a couple of username attributes and so on and so forth. And second is we wanna hash a password. We're gonna create a new method. And third is we wanna create a new method which will compare between the password that the user types and the one in the database. But before we move on, I want to explain to you guys what is Bicrypt. Like in a very simple term. Bicrypt is a library to hash a password before it even saves to database. So for example, if your password is ABC13, for example ABC13, once hashed, it will change to like 123 ASD13. It's gonna be a combination of numbers, alphabets, and probably symbols. Depends on the number of rounds you need. And this actually prevents us from storing the clear text password in the database. So, for example, if we don't use Bicrypt, we're gonna save our password as ABC13, and this is very bad in terms of security. So, there are three sections that we have to write the code. Again, I wanna kind of like rephrase again. First is the user schema field, and second is the hash password before we save it to the database, and lastly is to create a method for the user schema for comparing passwords in the database and the one that you type in. So I'm gonna delete these two. Alright, so just let's create a command so that we know what are we going to do. Alright, first there are three sections. First we're gonna create the user schema attributes, all right, or you can call it characteristic, or you can even call it fields. All right, doesn't matter. And second section is we're going to write the method. All right, we're gonna hash the password. So hash the password before we even save it to the database. Alright, and last section is we gonna compare password in the database and the one that the users type in. Alright, so let's start with the user schema field. So first we will declare a couple of username attributes, or you can call it characteristic fields or attributes. You can think of schema as a blueprint. For example, let's say there's a human class. All right, let's say there's human, and this human has hair color, or weight, or height, name, and so on and so forth. So this is the characteristics of human. All the human have the same thing. They have hair, they have weight, they have height, they have name, they have, I don't know what, like legs, hands, and stuff like that. So for our project, we will create a user schema. Why do we need this? So that we can store users' data like email, password, profile picture, and so on and so forth. So let's get started. You create a new variable and you call it user schema equals to new schema. You create an instance of mongoose dot schema, and then you want to pass in all the attributes like email. All right, so first email, the data type of email will be string. All right, then we're gonna add uniqueness equals true, and lastly we want to put lowercase is to true because we don't want things like rush or something like this. It's really terrible. We want to kind of like lowercase the whole email stuff. All right, so next is okay, before we move on, I just want to explain like what is this. All right, this is kind of like a sub rule of an email. We kind of like, we kind of like give the email a set of rules. Like the type of the email will be string, and it has to be unique. It only can be created by one time. And lastly, we want to make it lowercase so that again we wouldn't type in this kind of stuff. We want to store this kind of email in our database. All right, second is password. Since there's not much rule, like you don't need to add uniqueness and stuff, because you can be two people could have the same password, so we just put string. You don't need to be lowercase. It could be caps lock, combination of caps lock and lowercase and symbol and so on and so forth. And next is we want to add a profile. All right, profile. A profile could have a name, and we need to set we need to give it kind of like a sub rule string and a default. Actually we don't need this. Maybe, yeah, just put it for this is the one of the rule that, let's say if the name has, let's say you save the user schema and use an object to the database, right? Let's say you forgot to kind of like set the name to any name, then it will be by default, it will put default just an empty string. And same goes to picture. We want to kind of like have a picture and type string, and a default will be an empty string. All right, so once done, we want to add an address. Every user will have an address, so it could be the same address. It doesn't need to be unique or whatever. And last, we want to put history. This is why do we need this? Is this kind of like whenever a user purchase something, right? You kind of like want to, kind of like push all those products that you just bought to your user.history to history, like the quantity of the items, or the price of the total items that you just purchased, or the item itself, what kind of item you bought, and when did you actually buy this kind of stuff. So we want to put date equals to date. All right, and then we want to set paid equals to the type will be number. We don't want it to be string because it's a set of number, and default by default will be 0. And lastly, I think we should add items. All right, type. All right, this will be a little bit different. The type will be a little bit different, but I will explain to you after I just finish typing this. Object ID, and then you want to reference it to. Okay, maybe we're gonna put this later on. All right, but what is type schema type dot object ID? What is this? It's like a new kind of stuff. But we have one more problem. We cannot just declare this like this. We have to do mongoose.schema. But always the best practice is to actually declare it up here, schema equals to mongoose dot schema. All right. So once you have done doing this, you can just declare it like this, a new instance of schema, which is mongoose dot schema. Well, we're gonna get back to this, but for the time being, we won't do anything. We're just gonna add this couple of fields like email, password, profile, name, pictures, address, history. So just wanna show you how this is gonna appear later on when we test this. Like it's gonna be like this: user equals to new user, and then once, let's say you want to pass an email, right? Email equals to blah blah blah, user dot profile dot name equals to your name, Batman, or I don't know, any name that you could think of. And this is kind of like when you want to declare a new user in the future, but we're gonna get back to that later on when we sign up a new user. So let's go to a second section, since we already finished with our first section. This is when we actually going to save the password in the database. Before even save the database, we kind of like want to save it first. So how are we gonna do that? All right, first you type in user schema. All right, and you want to put user schema dot pre. All right, pre. Then you want to add a parameter of save, and then you put next. All right, so what this does, all right, you can think of it, pre is one of the mongoose method that every schema would have, for example. And pre is kind of like, you want to pre-save it before you actually save it to the database. So that's the reason why we add dot pre. That's the point of using user schema dot pre, and then we kind of add save. So you can think of it like pre-party, like before we even save it to the database, we want to like do something to it. So all right, so let's move on and let's write the code for pre-save. So you're gonna want to write var. You're gonna create a new object, new variable equals to this. So what is this? This is referring to the user schema itself. It's just an object. They're referring to user schema. For example, if it is an object of user schema, a new user schema, let's say var user new user, right? User. So this is when we running this function later on, when we kind of like save it to database, this is referring to this user. And let's say there's a second user called user1. So when he finished signing up, for example, and then this will refer to user1. All right. So let's continue, and then we're gonna write some logic like if not user, and then it will have a method called is modified. It will check whether actually dot is modified, whether the user document is modified or not. So you type in is modified, and then you pass in the password. And if not modified, you kind of like want to return a callback with no parameter. All right. Second, if the user is not modified, you kind of like want to bycrypt.gen salt. This is one of the bycrypt method which generate the salt. All right. So you can think of it as salt is just a random data that will be created by gen salt. All right, gen salt is just a short form for generating salt. So for example, you can pass in like number 10 and then another anonymous function like this. So 10 is the number of rounds of salt. Let's say random data like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 8. This is the number of rounds that the random data going to generate. This, what gen salt going to do is just going to generate 10 random data, and then we're going to pass this gen salt into another function, which we're going to do right now. And then you pass in, you add another anonymous function, and you pass in error as an argument, and another one is salt. All right. So what is salt? This is technically is kind of like a result of bytecrypt. All right. So when bytecrypt generate like random data, it will pass into this salt. I mean, salt is kind of like, if salt, I mean, if it's generating 10 different kind of data successfully, then salt is actually equals to that 10 random data, right? You're gonna see this kind of pattern, often later on. Like a lot of the same pattern we will write the same pattern in the future. Don't worry. Then after you type in this, you kind of like want to validate whether there's an error or not. So you want to return next with a parameter of error. So once done, if there's an error, you kind of like want to call back with an error. So because there's an error, right? All right. After there's an error, you want to pass in. You want to use one of the bytecrypt method, which is hash. Then you want to pass in user.password. And then you need to pass in three things: data, which is the user.password. And for example, user.password, you can think of it as later on, like let's say your password is 123. And then this is you actually passing 123. And second, you want to pass in the salt, all right? The 10 generating data, 10 different random data. And then you want to pass in null. The third parameter is basically just the progress. You can actually console log, or you can actually, you kind of see the progress of the hashing method, but we don't want that because it's not necessary. So we're just gonna pass it null. Now lastly, you want to add a anonymous function, error and hash. And then same thing, if there's an error, you want to return the callback with an error. If there's no error, you want to set the user.password equals to this. And I'm sorry, equals to hash. Sorry, I'm a little bit excited. And then after we have set it to hash, I mean, hash is actually equals to, for example, if your password is 123, and then it will do the generate salt, and then we'll get salt 10 different data, and it will pass in the 10 different data here. And it will do some functionality in this method. Will do some functionality. It will probably combine between this and do something, and then it will produce hash. So hash could be 1 to ABC Z or whatever. This is the data that you're gonna get produced. So once done, we want to return a callback with no parameters. It's successful. So there's no error. There's nothing. So move on. So what actually, again, I'm just gonna repeat again. So use.pre is basically you are saving something before you're actually saving to the database, and then you kind of like declare a new variable, and you kind of like make it equals to this, which is referring to user schema. And then if it's not modified, then return next. If yes, then bytecrypt dot kind of like generate 10 different data, and add salt is the result of this kind of like this method. And if there's an error, simply return it with a callback. If there's no error, do the hashing method, pass in the user password field, the data, and then you pass in the salt 10 different data, and then you pass in the progress. We don't need it for now, it's not necessary. And lastly, you enter the anonymous function, and if there's an error, return a callback with an error. And if there's no error, you kind of like want to set it to the user.password equals to hash. Then you want to run the callback, meaning it's done. This whole kind of like method is done. MongoDB actually gonna save user.password. So in the database, user.password will be this, for example, symbols or alright. So we are done with this. Let's move on to the last section of the file. This could be the easiest one because we just want to comparing between the password that you type in and the password in the database. So first, we want to create a custom method. All right, you type in user schema dot methods. All right, the difference between this and this is that pre is a built-in, kind of like built-in mongoose method. Well, this one is the one that you create yourself, so you can give it any name. But if you want to create a custom method, you always need to remember you need to add methods. Now user schema dot methods dot compare password. All right, or you can name it anything, comparing or whatever, as long as the name is relevant to what you want to do. Compare password. All right, equals to function, and then you want to add an argument like a password. This argument is the one that you type in. All right, always remember that. And you want to return by crypt dot, I think I spelled it wrong, by crypt, right? By crypt dot, we're going to use one of its method. We don't need to write it from scratch because bycrypt has its kind of like a built-in method which will handle this comparing kind of stuff. So you type in compare sync, and then you pass in the password that you type in and the password in the database, which is this dot password. This the password is referring to this one. All right, so once we are done, all right, we are done with the whole 3 sections. So I'm just gonna go through really fast. This is the characteristics of, kind of like a blueprint. Like you can kind of like name it anything, email, password. You can even put it full name or last name or anything that you could ever imagine. Maybe in the future you want to create your own web apps. Always think about the kind of like the fields that you want to put in. All right. So next is, again, we just kind of like save it even before we save it to the database. So this is the function that will do just that. For example, you can do this user schema dot pre, then you want to save, and then you want to kind of like next. All right, so var user equals to this. So imagine if before you want to save a user to the database, right, you kind of like want to by default user.name equals to handsome. So every user who kind of like sign up for your web application, whenever they sign up, even though they already entered a name, like different name, like user.name equals to something else, then but whenever this function runs, it will always change the name that you enter into this, the name that this method declare. So you can think of it as just pre-save. So you can play around with it if you want. The last is just a normal custom methods, which we comparing between the password that we type in and the password in the database. So that's about it. And in the next video, we're actually going to test out this kind of like this models. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay safe. Bye.